a lot of that they were training very little time in very little distance at a specific rest pace, much more than 3 times at a higher race pace than marathon pace, and most of the time in an easy or moderate, because we don't know since race paces in these guys is nearly under threshold the rest of the time. But the shape I want to summarize is this kind of new shape about training intensity distribution. Others look at the physiological training zones according to the 3-phase model defined by 2 thresholds, and they found that the U shape was the same, and that whether you measure this or determine these zones with heart rate, RPE, or lactate zones, you find the same or similar results. There is also special emphasis in recent years on easy training, whether it is, for instance, in this study that we did with our recreational runners, an event of high intensity, because these runners were about 32-33 minutes in 10K performance, and look at this correlation about the total training time in easy zone during the whole macro cycle. It was daily recording of 20 weeks before the main competition of the microcycle, and the highest correlation we found was especially with the easy intensity. And then next step, it's doing experimental designs, which is quite difficult, and to look at what happens with this training intensity distribution. And it was a work again with this kind of runners during the whole season, winter season, cross-country races, before and after 20 or 21 week microcycle, and comparing this kind of polarized, especially emphasis in easy training zone versus more than double in moderate training zone. And the difference at the end of the study, in the beginning both groups were equal in performance, was about 30 seconds, 36 seconds, and in cross-country races people are around 32-35 minutes in the gates, significant distance, apart from that statistic. So what about trial? Because in trial it's quite much more difficult to conduct this kind of studies, because personal best is relative. It's not the same as swimming or track and field. We must do 2 things basically to do this properly. They have to run the same competition, and the competition has no drafting loads, so you have to move to long distance events, and that's what we did last season, preparing some recreational triathletes that we coach in the Madrid area. We convinced them to go to the same Ironman, the Austria, the Klagenfurt Ironman in 4th of July, and they trained. It was 12 of them preparing this competition. The goals of the study was to describe the training intensity distribution along the last part of the preparation, the specific macrocycle, to describe what happened, again, same model that we will show in competition, and try to look for possible relationships between how you train and how you build. They do the typical testing to individualize the threshold in every event, and these people had a supervised training all the season, winter season, and the specific period that we are talking about after a transition period. This testing was conducted here, and there was a second testing in between to make them able to record daily training sessions in relation to training intensity. funny to say that it's the opposite between moderate and easy training zones, because here mostly we spend 60-something% in easy training zone, but in competition it shifts between moderate and easy training zones. Okay, this was the first goal and the second goal of the study. But what about relationship between time in the same event, same day, in an Ironman race, only of those who perform as best as possible, not stopping and these kind of things, versus the training load? Okay, let's look at total training time spent during 18 weeks of preparation and race time. As suspected, we found a significant relationship or correlation. And what about the training load? If we measure training load, the system that Dr. Fiquella explained the other day, or whether we did it with the traditional Lucia stream, we found that correlation is not existent. You see, you can do the same result with several kinds of training load. So what about training intensity distribution at the end? As expected, most of the training easy training zone had a high relationship with performance, but look at the right. The total training time in zone 2 had a very poor and also not really correlation with final performance in the Ironman. And if we look deeper in this kind of analysis, and of course we have to start to continue working on the statistical analysis and presenting the basic data at the moment. Look at the following figure. Percent of time in zone 2 was oppositely related to performance. Look at these two shapes, easy or moderate training time spent in the whole preparation. And it's the opposite effect. So those who were training the more percent of time in moderate zone performed the worst. So as a brief discussion, as some study had previously said, maybe the take-home message should be try to train as high intensity as possible, as hard as possible, those days that you have to push hard. And the rest of the day, just keep easy and avoiding increasing the fatigue for those important specific workouts. As Inigo said, it's the concern of the science and the art of training. And I think that one of the future challenges in science, in triathlon, has to be to compare different training programs. To do this kind of studies, of course they have many limitations, that we have to know because the little sample size and this kind of things is very difficult. And I think that this should be the challenge, to try to, with all the problems of how do we measure the training load, to try to relate it with the output. I'm not going to say that the polarized training, because it's a descriptive study that we did, you have to do an experimental study, is always the best. I am a little concerned about this. And let me show you preliminary data not published. I think that it could be interesting, that we have done twice. Last winter and the previous winter, we tried to do one of these experimental studies with our sample of athletes that we train every year. And we found tendency for recreational, less level, about 40 to 45 minutes in 10K runners, about the benefit of polarized training. And since it was not statistically significant, it was 3 years ago, this year we have repeated. We didn't find the same, so we don't reach to find significant difference in less skillful, less level athletes. So don't start thinking or enter the fashion, maybe it's a fashion of polarized training for all. Let's see, maybe the SCSM says, maybe for people who train less, it's better to train more. So it's not for all. And another question, another result that we have not published yet, the other concern is that there are several ways to reach the same result. So these are, again, unpublished data about the last set high-intensity sessions preparing a 10K in runners. The winter too is a study. One group was training basically a sprint interval training in running, not more than 500 meters repetitions, but the same, exactly the same at the beginning and at the end. So there are several ways to reach the same result. So what can we learn from this particular study that I'll show you? That if you want to train for an Ironman, first of all, look for time. You need time to train, basically. And don't push, don't strain those days that you have to train just easy days, because you have to keep for these specific race-based workouts. Train what you have to train. We expect that, especially in cycling training, many people push it too hard when they have to train easy. And because it's more time, the most time you spend in training in cycling and also in competition, maybe we find this conflicting results about training in moderate zones. And about not more than training 20% of total time in moderate zone in general. So the conclusion is that the Ironman trial is performed basically in zone 2, especially in swimming, and sometimes it's in zone 3,